Hey, and welcome back to the podcast. Cliff Locks is here. Now, Cliff is the founder and senior partner of CK Locks Consulting, Inc. He has three businesses: Millionaire Life Services, Investment Capital Growth, and Reverse Logistics Solutions. Cliff is a serial entrepreneur and investor. He formed and profitably exited three businesses, and Cliff has served on numerous boards, and he has so much to tell us about achievement, about goal setting, and he's accomplished what the dream path in life is, which is to accomplish great things and then later on give back and teach the lessons that he's learned. So, Cliff, excited to be speaking with you.
Robert, you're an ace, man. It's been a pleasure to listen to your fine podcasts and your guests. You really put together a very rich environment that's very nurturing and educational. So I want to compliment you and our listeners that we have a real community, and that's really the strength we bring forth. And it's a privilege to be with your guests. Our listeners are really important.
I agree. And it helps to have that sort of positivity. It doesn't take much effort or time to just like say a nice thing to somebody, because the world is filled with enough negativity. We don't need that. We want to achieve great things and to have this positive mindset and everything that goes with that. So we introduced you a little bit, but what are you all about? How do you stand out? How are you unique? What gets you excited these days?
Well, what really gets me excited is the next generation. If you really think about our young people coming into business, our employees, our team members, creating wonderful, flourishing teams that really are bringing their best self to the job site, and really listening to, what the vision of success looks like. Usually it's our leaders. It could be our CEOs, our board of directors, our presidents, that sort of are laying out a vision of what they're looking to accomplish in the next month, 3 months, 6 months, a year out, even 3 to 5 years out. And when you start to really look at that and you start to work it backwards, we have a chance to really look at sharing that with the team members and how they fit in, and also look at the path of being able to, how deep is the bench? In other words, what does our team look like? In other words, I have built three companies and have sold them, but I built them to sell them. So not everybody is thinking that, but that's usually where the real wealth is made in life, is that exit. If, our listeners want to consider that, as part of their, how they want to run their business, but selling the business means you can't be the only individual that's really at the front. It's about a team. The new individual that's looking to acquire is looking for a business that's ongoing, is thriving, growing. And that's how you get a very high, profitable multiple, is the idea that the business is continuing to grow and scale.
I love that just this simple concept that you sold a business. There's so much built into that, as you said, because for you to have sold a business, you have to be organized, you have to plan, you have to build a team, you have to have everything in order so that way it can be somewhat turnkey when you hand it off, because you don't want to just be a business owner and then sell, then now you're an employee for someone else. It doesn't sound like fun at all. And it's definitely not something that you can repeat 3 times and then go off and do something else. Now you're kind of just stuck with that business. And so, as I said, there's a lot built into just those couple of statements and what you've done. And so what's the secret of your success? Like, people talk about these things like goal setting and time management and having a good network, and these are all important, but what's the order of importance? What should we be thinking about, and what are people missing these days?
It's a really important question you're asking, Robert. You're brilliant. If we really go out there and we put the time into really understanding what our vision of success looks like, which means is the goal writing down the exercise. I had shared something earlier in one of our conversations about Brian Tracy, somebody that's mentored me. And it's a privilege to take that material in, that self-improvement material, write down what your goals are, because subliminally we're making decisions during the day. And if we really think about it, the decisions we'll make will go back to what was important, which we wrote down was our goals. So we have our business goals, we have our family goals, we have our children goals. At this point, the more detail, and sometimes I'll use the word color, that we can bring into the goals, it makes it a lot easier to accomplish them. So, with my teams and the individuals I coach, and mentor all over the world, the goal setting is the key piece that allows people to really thrive. And then also understand when they arrive, meaning they are successful, They actually understood, hey, this is what I was looking to accomplish. I've accomplished it, or on my journey to accomplish it. So you get that, sort of feedback. And in business, sometimes we'll talk about KPIs or OKRs. So those key performing indicators, trying to measure against, targets that we're setting for ourselves and team members. And that way we're all aligned, and I think we have to share, how we're going to get measured with our team members so they can actually bring the best of themselves forward. And I think, we see companies that want to do annual, reviews. And I'm like, no, you really need to do it kind of like monthly or at least quarterly at a minimum, because people really want to bring themselves forward and be part of that ecosystem where things are really moving in a good direction. But if they don't know they need to make improvements and you wait until the end of the year, you're not doing a good service to the team member at that point. And it's kind of late.
And it seems like maybe the problem that you're explaining here is people not taking their goals seriously, right? Because goals are misunderstood, or they seem to be by the average person, that there's a few little rules and regulations built into it. And I don't know if you've experienced similar frustration, but sometimes, like just in my past years and travels, when I try to talk to someone about goals, like they don't have them, they don't think they're important. The average person just has this New Year's resolution kind of idea, and then it gets thrown out very quickly. And even just you're making me think about when trying to plan for the future, when it's like you try to work with someone and they don't really phrase it in even a complete sentence. And it's like, are you afraid of the future, or are you afraid of these goals? But I think that you're so right that these goals are important, because that way you know when you've arrived there, and then you can move on to the next thing. It's never complete, it's never done. And then there's also this aspect you mentioned of having others be on the journey with you, because that way it's not so lonely. And then you also mentioned a little bit there about how you know about your priorities that way, because the time will pass either way. And if we don't have these important goals to kind of keep at the forefront and say, okay, if I want to get over here in 52 weeks, I can't wait until week 51 to do it. I need to be working on this daily. And then when the distractions come in, the emails, the social media, then we can prioritize and we can say, well, hey, I'll make this small sacrifice here, so that way I can work on my goal, because I know that I'm pursuing something greater. I'm looking for that kind of delayed gratification. And so as far as these companies that you've sold, I'm really curious. So, like, what were these, or is there one that really stands out for you, or what was this journey like as far as creating, building, selling? I mean, tell us about it.
Well, the last company I sold to a Fortune 500 company. And it was a privilege to get acquired. I'll give you some metrics, so the listeners have some value. We got paid 11 times EBITDA. So EBITDA would be the profit of the company. Okay. And that's a very nice multiple, but it really, the gem that I'm looking to share with our listeners is it had a vision of what the future looked like. It had additional acquisitions. It had additional new business lines. And that future, which was a growing future, and the individual acquired us, had the resources, I mean the financial resources, to make the investments. That's why they paid a very high multiple, because most companies get sold for 6 to 8 times EBITDA, but 11 is very high. So, the takeaway is, look, if you plan a rich future and you can articulate that to the company that's acquiring you, they'll pay you more. And then the other side of it is, part of the conversation is, are you going to have an earn out, or is it an all cash deal? Mine, I've always done all cash deals, but it's not always that way. So to our listeners, you'll find, the individual is looking to sort of get you to stay there for 18 months, in my case, and part of that transitional team. I think the integration piece, meaning someone's going to, there's an acquisition taking place. How is our team going to be integrated into the larger company in our case? So I think that needs to get discussed very, very early on: employment contracts, facilities. So it's a very smooth process, and the acquiring company will obtain the value that they had projected in their pro formas, and they'll do well. So I think that's the piece of it. I mean, the other side of it is, when I step back, I own a professional sports marketing company, for the NHL teams, and Dodgetown Islanders, the Detroit Pistons, all clients. And then I had an ad agency, sales promotion. So, marketing's always been a key piece. When we talk about a legacy for ourselves and our listeners, what's going on in your family and your business. I have a couple of books that I've written in Amazon that are available on Amazon. How to achieve success fast, how to be a self-millionaire, you know, guiding the next generation to thrive and build continued success for your family legacy. These are just the ways for me to give back to the community, to say there's some shortcuts that are out there, but they're very workable. They're not hard. It's this thoughtful process. And the goal setting, Robert, was the key piece on the front end that allows a lot of this to come together and be seamless. And at the end of the day, it should be fun. We should be doing things that we really enjoy doing. You know?
And that's what we all want, right? No one
Yeah.
wants to slave and toil for 50 years for the hope of something later. It should be fun, enjoyable, fulfilling. We should have this forward momentum. And so tell us about the goal setting. As you said, we connected previously and we talked about Brian Tracy, and I watched some Brian Tracy at your recommendation. But in your own words, what's goal setting about? And do we need to focus on the basics, the fundamentals to make sure we get it? Like, just what do we need to do with our goals?
I think we have to break the goals down to a couple of different pieces. And I'll speak for myself. In other words, I married a young lady 30 years ago. We're married for 36 years now. So just think about, we know each other for 37 years. Actually, we met because it's funny because today is the 16th of February. We met on Valentine's Day on the Long Island Railroad going into Manhattan from Long Island. So it was a romantic story. I sent her some roses, actually 2 dozen after, meeting her on the train, to where she worked. I shared her business card. So it's just a funny anecdotal type story. But she was in my goals. I mean, I had taken the time to figure out what skills and attributes I wanted in a life partner. I figured out how much money I would need, and I wrote this down, as part of my goals, on the cash flow. I knew I wanted a boat. I knew I wanted to go camping and hiking. I knew I wanted to go skydiving. I knew I wanted to go scuba diving. These are things that I had in my goals, which some people could be a stretch goal. I knew I wanted to have a family, with children. So one of the unique things I'll share with our listeners, which is really, it's a gift from Robert and myself to our listeners, is if we can bring the goal setting into our children's lives, where they start to write their goals down. And it could be, my kids, they did it on a write-on wipe-off board in their rooms. You get a different type of child that's hyper-focused on what's important, taking ownership of their learning. You'll have less disruption in the home. We see some programs out there, The Leader in Me, which is out of Stephen Covey's organization, which is K through 12. And it's taking Stephen Covey's motivational material, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and it's bringing it into kindergarten through 12th grade. And you get a very different type of young person because their goals are written down. It happens to be in maybe the marble notebook that we probably all had in our early years at school. But it works extremely well. So that's the gift, I want to share with our listeners, Robert, because you have a real vibrant community. If we can go out there and we can make the world a little better place and really try to help others as a giver, I think it's magical, and care about our teams and our families, our neighbors, we're all in it together at the end of the day.
I love it. That's a great message. And especially setting up the next generation for success, because I don't know about you, Cliff, but when I was a kid, when I was in school,
Mhm.
parents, teachers, they just said, here, do the assignment, just work hard. And there wasn't really much reason to do it other than here, you're here to do this and you have to. And it's really, and that's fine, I guess, but then it's all too easy for your brain to invent reasons to procrastinate or for the negative self-talk to just fill in that empty space when
Mhm.
there isn't much in terms of a purpose or explaining why this is important or what we're building towards. And it seemed at least very fear-based, right? It was like, don't fail this class because if you fail this class, you won't go to college. If you don't go to college, you won't get a job. It was just very like brutal, sort of, and not warm and positive in the way that you're speaking now. And so it seems like there is a better way to do it. And then also, so you're mentioning that, they're working to get these sorts of things in different school curriculums, but even if it's not taught in school, that's still okay. They're your kid. You can teach your kid goal setting, achievements, entrepreneurism, and all these other sorts of things. And so I think that's a really good message and something to think about. But something that would really interest me is finding out about your own maybe mistakes, failures, if
Sure.
you experience any sort of like negativity, stress, because that's the good stuff, right? Especially when you've gone through that and come out stronger. So, does anything come to mind as far as just the past negativity, the hurt, the pain, the problems? What comes to mind?
All of us have wounds for childhood. I think we just need to realize that when you're looking at life, and one of the metaphors would be life is like a book. So the prior chapters have already been written in your life. So any kind of, if you're getting picked on or some of the disruption that can take place within a family nucleus or outside influences, are a key piece of it. But we also have the privilege of writing the next chapter in our book into the future. So, are you going to get delayed on looking backwards, or are we going to look forward and plan for a bright future? We really are in control more than we give ourselves credit for at times. So, going to school, university was not easy. I'm an Rochester Institute of Technology graduate. Um, Building the businesses early on, I was using credit cards for lines of credit, so, hundreds of thousands of dollars were utilized. Now, there's easier ways now to go out there and raise equity or maybe an SBA loan. So these are more vibrant ways to do it. But in my case, I used, lines of credit through that. Cash flow is a key piece that eliminates a lot of the pain that can be in somebody's life. All right. It's, the lifeblood. So if we have enough cash coming in, we can support the family ourselves, and that reduces some of the agita that takes place. Folks, listeners can reach out to me as they're, where they are with their lives to figure out what do you want to work on at this point? What does the future look like? And sort of work it backwards so you can execute on your plan. And so when you're looking at pain, a lot of it is, and I guess you got to look at it a couple of ways. I took some time to really work on myself. So that's one of the takeaways for our listeners. You own it, meaning I own it. I scouting, Boy Scouting was very, very influential on career planning and figuring out what do we want to do between the transition from high school into the university. It's a heck of a lot easier to do it right on the front end because you're going to spend, let's say, 4 or 5 years at a university. You might as well pick a career that you really want to enjoy and you want to thrive in. All right, versus going there and not knowing what you want to do and trying to find yourselves. And scouting has something called the Merit Badge program, and it does extremely well. So some of us do a sports path, some of us do scouting, some do both. So around a well-rounded youth is doing sports, is doing scouting. Okay. And now you're having this, ability to really figure out where is your passion? What do you love to do? And can you make a career out of that? And if you're doing things you don't enjoy doing, it's really a time to reassess why. And then at that point, are you going to make some physical changes or get self-educated? Look, generative AI is going to be disruptive. We could use the word co-pilot. We could use the word assistant. Those that don't want to level up their knowledge could very well get displaced. But it's not a given at this point. We're early enough where we can actually get educated as an assistive tool to actually provide additional resources for what we're working on within our organization. So it's powerful. And it's easier than most people realize to actually take the time to use, generative AI, which would be, ChatGPT. There's some competitors out of, from Microsoft and Google. Reach out if you need help. Any of the listeners, it's to me, it's fun, and we use it in the Hyper Accelerator program very, very heavily to build business cases, market fit, looking at the team, figuring out what the roles are sitting in there, what's working well, the financials, investments that need to be made in a company. And so, folks looking to raise money, that's, something else that I live in that space. You really, remember, it's not, one of the takeaways, it's not about burning investors' cash. It's really about driving revenue, profitable revenue that's sustainable and continues to grow, that allows the business to continue to really thrive and scale is really the magic. And the investor's capital is really supposed to be fuel to allow that to take place.
That's just so much to think about. And I love your mindset and how simple it can be. And sure, there's uncertainty and there are unknowns in the path ahead, but just this is wonderful to think about when you say, well, there's the future will happen whether you plan it or not. Might as well plan it, figure out what you want, take the time, get really detailed, set those stretch goals, and then work backwards and figure out, okay, what will I need to do to get there? And that also might involve just the questions you're not even thinking of, right? Like you mentioned about some of these business terms, like talking about cash flow and things like that. And if someone might say, well, I need other people in my circle or on my team, even just to be aware of what I'm not even considering, what I don't even know. And it can be exciting, right? If we have this sort of self-awareness that you're talking about and just think some of these things through because a lot of people don't. And you see what happens when you don't think those things through. And this is what we need to be doing. And so there's just so many more paths we could take in our conversation, but we want to keep people eager and thirsty
Mm-hmm.
to check you out on social media, to find out your books, to find out about your company. So tell us, what are some next steps? What's the call to action here?
You can visit my website, which is millionairelife.services. So that's millionairelife.services. Amazon, if you just, type in Cliff Locks, you'll find, a multitude of books. I've written 7 books. I published so far 4. And it's just, again, it's a part of the legacy on how to give back to others of service. You know, other places to reach me, you can go onto LinkedIn. You'll find me posting things that are, what I consider to be important and thoughtful and inquisitive. Um, I love strategic partnerships. I love to scale. I love being on the board of directors or board of advisors of companies. Um, Not everybody needs to struggle. When you go out and you figure out what that inner circle of really, really bright individuals that have been there, meaning have built and exited companies, or the circle of influence of friends that you have, are they lifting you up or are they holding you back? Give it some thought. It's a thoughtful process, but sometimes we take it for granted. We just go through the day and it's like, well, you could pull back a little bit and do some inner thinking and write it down on paper. And now the generative AI, you could ask, to help you write your goals. The generative AI will help you actually refine things and give it more detail. And it's amazing how easy it is. And you can Google or you can watch some YouTubes on engineering a prompt, which means just asking a question to the generative AI, and it'll come back with thoughtful information. So, Robert, it's been fun. Anything to do to support you and your listeners, it's always a privilege. And thank you for what you do for the community.
And thank you for saying that. And it is a privilege just hearing your thought process and your logic. And it seems like it's so important to take the time, think these things through, and just to be well read because people have lived whole lifetimes and figured some of these things out through trial and error. And now you don't have to go through those years. And they've also condensed it into a little book, such as the books that you have put out. And the resources are out there. It's just a matter of finding them, of finding the right people, or as with the generative AI, just having these skills of wading through the mess, right? Differentiating the signal from the noise, because ChatGPT sure as heck can give you a whole big bunch of text that you don't use. But as you said, you go back and forth with it. You say, here's what I'm thinking, help me develop my goals, help me figure out some of these strategies, as long as we are careful and we think some of these things through as far as what we want, what we will do to get there, what the future will look like, then we can achieve great and amazing things and enjoy our life and just help others in the process, which is what it's all about. And so you need to check out Cliff Locks on social media, but most importantly, check out his books, especially that one about what was it called, about steps to becoming a millionaire. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, how to be a self-made millionaire. Yeah.
Yes. And so what, as we're winding down our conversation here, what's next for Mr. Cliff Locks? I know that you talk about like you want these hopes and dreams about being on boards, but do you have like a ultimate life purpose that is not yet fulfilled?
Well, I've written 8 courses at this point that are self-paced, so that's one of the big takeaways, and it was part of my goals. I shared that I have 7 books. Um, Not all are published. I'm publishing one every 6 weeks at this point, so it rolls out. Probably sitting on more boards of some of your listeners to assist them on what they're looking to accomplish in their lives. Um, it's really a listening campaign. What's important to the individual? What are they really, really good at? What do they love to do? It's got high margins and you get paid. So you're really great at it. You love doing it. It's highly profitable and you get paid. So focusing on those rich, skill sets that people have to really make sure it plugs in. And sometimes we're missing some team members that may be on, or it could be 2 companies coming together to create, sort of a merger. And now one has the client, somebody's got some phenomenal services. It's just this thoughtful process. How do we build these, multi-million dollar companies, 10, 15, 20, $100 million companies to really, at the end of the day, I had suggested considered exit, to sell so you can really take some wealth off the table. But again, it's up to the individual what's important to them. And the other piece I'll leave with our listeners, ask your employers for equity in your fine company, ask for options. In other words, if you don't ask, you don't get. So ownership of an entity at some point that exits will help create some additional wealth, even if you're an employee. But if you got to ask, you know, so you can always get back to me. If somebody has something that's trying to negotiate something with an employer or for somebody they report to, I'm happy to sort of come up with some strategies that'll help that individual to thrive in those conversations and build their confidence. Remember, it's always about value that we're bringing to the company. So when you look at your salary and your benefits, you need to deliver 10 times that value, meaning what you're taking from the company, in essence, in sort of compensation. And the company needs to have a 10x value to what you're bringing to that organization. So we have a fiduciary responsibility to give back, to those organizations so they can thrive.
Excellent. Well, I love your abundance mindset and just the way that you're thinking about the future and just it's very visual, right? When you talk about merging companies or about how you're listening, it's great to hear about your thoughts and about what you've accomplished. So check out Cliff Locks all over the internet and dial in if you want to speak with him and some of that strategizing that he's talking about. Cliff is a very generous man with his knowledge and what he's figured out over the years. So check out those social media posts and check out that book, and you'll be glad you did because Cliff just has a wealth of knowledge that you can benefit from and then use and then pass along to others. And everybody wins in that situation. So, Cliff, it's been wonderful speaking with you.
All right, Robert. Appreciate what you do. And it's been a lot of fun to interact with yourself and our listeners. And thank you.